Southern Fried True Crime covers cases that are not suitable for young listeners, and there may also be some explicit language used. Listener discretion is advised. On Thursday, June 25th, 1998, Officer Chris Long was having a normal, hot summer night. He was patrolling Moody, Alabama, in his police car, and he was keeping an ear to his radio just like he always did. So when Chris heard his colleague, Officer Keith Turner, send a radio transmission to Central Dispatch, he listened like he always would. But it wasn't anything special. Keith was pulling over a vehicle for a routine traffic stop. Automatically, Chris headed towards Keith's location. Later, Chris would testify that this was out of habit. He said anytime he stopped a car, I backed him up, and vice versa. Even when Chris had Keith's patrol car in sight, he didn't think anything was off. He heard a few pops, but it was June 25th. The 4th of July holiday was only a week away. People were always setting off firecrackers early, especially in rural Alabama. But when Chris heard additional pops, followed by screaming, his stomach dropped as he realized it wasn't fireworks. Welcome to episode 209, The Disgraced Hero and Fugitive, Mario Centobie. Officer Keith Ashley Turner was born in November 1968 to his parents, Dot and Pat Turner, in Pell City, Alabama. He had 2 brothers and a sister. And although Keith was born in Pell City, he primarily grew up in a town called Ragland. Ragland is located in St. Clair County, Alabama. It's about 15 miles north of Pell City and 50 miles east of Birmingham. Ragland is your typical rural small town. Its population sits at about 2,000, plus or minus several hundred people, depending on the year. When I say, this is the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, I mean it. Everyone in Ragland is just about on a first-name basis. How could they not be? They're filling up their cars at the same 2 gas stations. They're going to the same grocery store. And when they want a night out, they're all headed to the only restaurant in town, which, if you're wondering, serves barbecue. Keith's family was from Ragland. His mother, Dot, was a lifelong member of the Ragland Methodist Church and attended Ragland High School. Keith's father, Pat, was a military veteran. He had served in the U.S. Navy during World War II as a machinist mate. Pat operated and maintained ships, and it's likely his military status was a big part of the Turner family. In fact, before Dot passed away in 2021 at the age of 94, she was a member of the local VFW auxiliary. Keith was a member of his mother's Methodist church, and in 1987, 18-year-old Keith graduated from the same Ragland High School she did. On June 27, 1996, 28-year-old Keith married a woman named Brandy. She was about 20 years old at the time. A year later, in the spring of 1997, Brandy gave birth to the couple's first and only child, a little girl. According to Brandy, Keith was a fantastic father. The Birmingham Post-Herald reported that Brandy said, "He was a wonderful man. He lived for her." The summer after Keith's daughter was born, he hit another big milestone. He graduated from the University of Alabama's Police Academy. Keith had wanted to be a law enforcement officer for quite some time. I imagine this was an especially exciting accomplishment for him. Keith began his police career with the Southside Police Department near Gadsden, Alabama. In March of 1998, he switched to a new position at the police department in Moody, Alabama. Moody, like Ragland, is also located in St. Clair County. And while Moody is also a small, rural town, it is slightly bigger than Ragland. In the late 1990s, approximately 8,000 people lived there. In June of 1998, Keith was 29 years old and thriving. He had a loving wife, a young daughter, a supportive family. Plus, Keith had started his dream career. A dream career that, as it turns out, he had a knack for. Moody Police Chief Robert Clements said of Keith, "I wish I had a dozen more just like him." Others who knew Keith remarked on how kind and generous he was. A previous supervisor told the Birmingham Post-Herald he was an outstanding young man. He always had a smile on his face and was ready to help anyone. On June 27, 1998, Keith's anniversary, he was on duty in his marked Moody police vehicle. At 10:30 p.m., he pulled over a 1981 Mercury Grand Marquis for a routine traffic stop. The Marquis parked in a residential driveway. Before Keith exited his car, he radioed Central Dispatch to let them know he had stopped this vehicle. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, Officer Chris Long heard the transmission and made his way towards Keith's location. Meanwhile, Keith walked toward the Marquis he pulled over. Suddenly, a man got out of the car. Keith called out, "Hey, what are y'all doing?" The man leaned into the car's window and said, "Give me my license." Then the man leaned down and reached through the window. But when he straightened up, he did not have his license. Instead, he had a gun. Without warning, the man shot Keith 3 times. The first bullet was stopped by Keith's bulletproof vest. The second hit his hip, and the third was fired directly into the back of his head. 29-year-old Officer Keith Turner died immediately. He did not even have time to draw his weapon. When Officer Chris Long pulled up, the 2 men responsible for Keith's murder ran. The man who was inside the car went one way, and the shooter went another. The 2 hid among the swampy, wooded areas in St. Clair County. Almost immediately, a massive manhunt began. No one had laid eyes on these men yet, but the authorities were damn near positive they knew exactly who these fugitives were. 32-year-old Mario Centobie and 19-year-old Jeremy Granberry. They had both escaped from a Mississippi prison 2 days earlier. Mario Giovanni Centobie was born in 1966 to his mother, Tracy Wolfe, and his father, John Arden Centobie, in Biloxi, Mississippi. His gravestone indicates he was born on January 26th, but according to an FBI wanted poster, Mario's birthday is actually October 26th. That same FBI wanted poster explained that January 26th was just an alias birthday Mario used, probably to help avoid detection. When Mario was around 4 years old, his biological father left his family. Mario's new stepfather was Richard O'Connor. When Tracy and Richard were wed, Mario would have been approximately 17 years old. By the time Mario was grown, he had at least 7 siblings. Some of them were full siblings, while others were half-siblings. Mario spent the bulk of his childhood in and around 2 Mississippi cities, Biloxi and Long Beach. They're about 17 miles apart from each other on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. In 1984, 18-year-old Mario graduated from Long Beach High School. He had played football there. By the time he was about 20 years old, he still lived in Long Beach. At 9:15 p.m. on Sunday, June 1st, 1986, Mario was involved in a gun-related accident. He was cleaning his 20-gauge shotgun when it accidentally discharged. He was taken to the hospital where he underwent emergency surgery. At the time, authorities told the Sun-Herald that the accident was under investigation. In fact, the Sun-Herald article that reported on this event used the word supposedly when referencing the incident. It seemed people weren't sure that Mario was telling the truth. But as far as I can tell, no additional news reports came about this incident. When Mario was in his 20s, he became a firefighter. According to his obituary, he was the valedictorian of his class at the State of Mississippi Fire Academy. And, as reported by the Sun-Herald, 25-year-old Mario was working for the Orange Grove Fire Department in Biloxi by March of 1991. He appeared to be doing very well there. In fact, Mario was sometimes chosen to be the fire department's informal spokesman. And by that I mean, when local newspaper journalists needed a quote from a fireman on the ground, they would go to Mario. For example, when a local grass burning got out of control and spread to more than 300 acres of land, Mario told the Sun-Herald it was the largest woods fire I'd ever been in. Nobody was hurt. I found several similar quotes from Mario published in the Sun-Herald. He was usually explaining what may have caused a recent fire and giving an estimate of the damage. According to his obituary in 1992, the 26-year-old was named Firefighter of the Year. Newspapers reported that by August of 1992, Mario had risen to the rank of captain. He was also sometimes cited as being a training officer. Months later, in December of 1992, Mario completed a 5-week training program at the State Fire Academy. The next year, in 1993, Mario was dubbed Fireman of the Year. I'm not sure if that's the same as the Firefighter of the Year Mario received in 1992. Sometime between 1992 and 93, Mario also worked for the D'Iberville Fire Department. But by December of 1993, he had resigned from that position. In addition to being a fireman, Mario was a lifeguard, a CPR instructor, a rescue diver, and a rope rescue specialist. Mario received 9 Green Cross Awards for rescuing trapped and injured victims. On July 12th of 1994, 28-year-old Mario and another rescue professional, Norman Barnum, were recognized for helping with the Amtrak train disaster near Mobile, Alabama. You may have heard of it. It's sometimes called the Big Bayou Cannet Rail Accident. On September 22, 1993, a towboat pulling along heavy barges ran into a bridge. The collision knocked the bridge's train track out of alignment, and 8 minutes later, an Amtrak passenger train carrying 200 people was derailed. The train was traveling about 70 miles per hour. In total, 47 people died. More than 100 were injured. Mario was a volunteer for the Long Beach Dive and Rescue Team, so he was helping clean up the scene afterward. He repeatedly dove into the bayou to help recover bodies and other items. Mario told the Sun-Herald the devastation of the crash was almost unbelievable. Norman, the other recognized man, had helped on the surface. For their work on the accident, Mario and Norman were presented a certificate of merit from the Mobile County Sheriff's Flotilla. But despite Mario's long list of accomplishments as a rescue worker, he was not a good guy. There's no other way to put it. He just wasn't. This was a man who might have been a hero for some good portions of his life. But by the end of this episode, you're going to understand that all of Mario's good deeds could never outweigh his bad ones, and it's time we talk about those. At some point in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Mario married a woman named Cheryl Lynn Stanley. There isn't much information available about Cheryl's past, but she was likely a Mississippi native born around 1969. She was in her late teens or early 20s at the time that she had began a relationship with Mario. Cheryl and Mario had one son together named Dominic, and for a while, the family of 3 lived together in Gulfport, Mississippi, which is just 4 miles to the east of Long Beach. Cheryl worked as a teacher's aide at a local elementary school, and Mario, of course, was a rescue worker. But soon the couple began having serious problems. Mario was abusive. On at least one occasion, he admitted to slapping Cheryl. Afterward, she got a restraining order against him. And by September of 1995, 26-year-old Cheryl and 29-year-old Mario were separated. Cheryl and her son Dominic lived in a Gulfport home together, and Mario was on his own. Mario and Cheryl's separation may have been a shock to Mario's family. Later, they would say they didn't believe Mario would hurt his wife, but the separation probably wasn't a shock to Cheryl's family. Her father later testified that, for 2 years, it had been painfully clear that Cheryl feared her husband. Her father told the Sun Herald, "The whole family is still worried about her. It's rough. She has been plumb scared to death." And the authorities would later confirm Mario's domestic violence as well. Police Chief George Payne of the Gulfport Police Department said Mario was violent and abused Cheryl repeatedly. Payne also indicated that both Cheryl and their son Dominic were scared to death of Mario, and that Mario was known for using fear and intimidation to control them. On the evening of Saturday, September 16th of 1995, Mario cut the phone lines to Cheryl and Dominic's home. Then he kicked open her front door, violently pushing into the house. At the time, Cheryl and little Dominic, who was between 5 and 7 years old, were watching television. I'm sure they were terrified to see Mario burst in while wielding a gun. Mario used the gun to force Cheryl and Dominic into his rented Ford Probe sedan. And Mario told Cheryl that he would kill their son if she didn't follow his orders exactly. For 4 days, Mario held his estranged wife and son captive. He took them from Mississippi to Louisiana to Texas. All the while, Mario sexually assaulted Cheryl repeatedly, while their son was present. When they were near San Antonio, Mario wanted to force another man to sexually assault Cheryl. She testified, "We went to a truck stop, but he couldn't find a man that was by himself. He got back in the car and put the gun to his head. He said he just didn't want to live anymore, and then he put the gun down." Eventually, Cheryl convinced Mario that she would not divorce him, and she agreed to retract her previous allegations of abuse. Honestly, what else was she supposed to do? Stand her ground and die? With Cheryl's agreements in mind, Mario decided to return to Mississippi. He needed to go to the city of Pearl anyway. He had to make a court appearance to pay a $100 fine and do 6 months of probation for an unrelated shoplifting charge. And now that Mario felt he had his wife and son back under his thumb, he felt comfortable showing up. Afterward, they would go back to their Gulfport home. In his mind, things would return to normal. So Mario threw away his gun at a convenience store, and on Tuesday, September 19th, 1995, he had Cheryl drop him off at the Pearl courthouse. Cheryl took the rental car to wash it, and then she and Dominic waited for Mario in a Walmart parking lot. It was near the courthouse. Later, it would be pointed out by Mario's defense attorneys that Cheryl could have simply driven away, obviously ignoring the amount of control Mario had over Cheryl. He had terrorized her and her child for 4 days. She was terrified to defy Mario. When Mario arrived at the Pearl courthouse, someone had the wherewithal to realize he was out on bond. He was facing charges of sexual assault and domestic violence against his wife. And with a little more digging, they realized that same wife and Mario's son had been reported missing. Thankfully, the court officials and other authorities put things together. And as Cheryl and Dominic waited for Mario to finish his court proceedings, 2 FBI agents approached them. And those FBI agents told Cheryl that Mario had been arrested for kidnapping. The authorities had been on the lookout for Mario shortly after he had abducted his wife and son on Saturday, September 16th. And that's because Cheryl's father and her stepmom had gone to Cheryl's home on Sunday, September 17th. They saw that her front door was kicked in. The house was unusually messy, and the phone wasn't working. Even the television had been left on. Clearly, something was wrong. So Cheryl's father reported his daughter and grandson missing. And due to Mario's history of domestic violence, he was the police's number one suspect. When Mario was arrested 4 days later, he was taken to Gulfport and held on a $50,000 bond. 2 days later, on September 21st, Mario's bond was increased to $1 million. Needless to say, he couldn't pay it, so he remained in jail. Mario was indicted that November. His charges were kidnapping, aggravated assault, burglary, and sexual battery, and one count of sexual battery related to an earlier incident. And his trial began the next year on October 14, 1996. By this point, Cheryl had successfully divorced Mario. During the trial, Mario's defense team argued that Cheryl had agreed to go on this, quote, trip. They suggested that it was a family vacation, not a kidnapping. Mario's defense attorney said their marital issues were typical. They pointed to how, despite their separation, Cheryl and Mario had recently interacted at church, the movie theater, and restaurants. They had witnesses to prove as much. One of Mario's acquaintances thought Mario and Cheryl were making up. But that same person also testified that Mario had recently been suicidal, and that he had mentioned getting a gun. The defense also cast doubt on the police investigation. The authorities had let Cheryl drive her son home after Mario's arrest. That in and of itself wasn't the problem. The problem was that Cheryl drove home in the same rental car that Mario had kidnapped her in. And she had removed trash like fast food wrappers from the car before turning it over to the police to be searched. The defense was alleging that Cheryl may have tampered with evidence. By the time the Ford vehicle was searched, detectives found blood on the passenger side seat belt. Cheryl testified that this was because she was bleeding while sitting in that seat. Mario had pistol whipped her in the head. And there was a lot of blood. She had had to wrap her head with a shirt to staunch the bleeding. When those two FBI agents found Cheryl, she did have a head injury. However, the seatbelt blood was never proven to be Cheryl's. The authorities had intended to send samples to the state crime lab for testing, but for unknown reasons, those samples were never sent. Also, the shirt Cheryl had used to wrap her head was never found. Another issue with the investigation was that they had not sent Cheryl to the hospital to complete a rape test, and they didn't check Cheryl or Mario's clothing for semen. The defense team also had proof that when a Gulfport police officer had interviewed Cheryl immediately after the kidnapping, she had said she had gone on the trip of her own accord. And they pointed out how Cheryl wrote letters to Mario while he was in jail. She had even signed them with the word love. But this, again, was due to Cheryl's fear of Mario. While on the stand, Cheryl testified as to how terrified she was of Mario. She explained that she had written him letters because she didn't know if he was getting out of jail. She said, "I didn't want him to be mad at me. He will kill me." Cheryl testified to her story in detail, and officers explained to the jury that they found wire cutters in Mario's personal vehicle, which was a truck that had been abandoned in a casino parking lot. The prosecution claimed these wire cutters were what Mario used to cut Cheryl's phone lines before he kidnapped her. The prosecution also called to the stand Cheryl's 17-year-old neighbor. He had seen Mario peeking into the windows of Cheryl's home days before the kidnapping. And a bank worker testified that Mario had stopped by the bank a day before the kidnapping. He had seemed upset and had withdrawn $5,000. That's just under $10,000 today. But when asked about how he and Cheryl were doing, Mario said they were fine. Cheryl and Mario's elementary school-age son, Dominic, also testified. He verified that Mario had a gun on him, saying he kept it in a pouch in a red car. And Dominic confirmed that his father had beaten his mother in front of him. On Friday, October 18, 1996, the jury convicted 30-year-old Mario Centobie of aggravated assault and burglary. He was acquitted of all sexual battery charges. It's likely the jury made that decision because Cheryl had not undergone a rape test and the lack of testing for Mario's semen. Ultimately, Mario was sentenced to 40 years in prison, 20 years for kidnapping, 10 years for aggravated assault, and 10 for burglary. The jury had considered life in prison, but they couldn't make a unanimous decision on it, so it was off the table. This wasn't an extremely high-profile case. In fact, the authorities didn't disclose any information about the case to news reporters until after Cheryl and Dominic were recovered. That was a purposeful decision meant to keep them safe. However, for those who did follow the case, Mario's convictions were controversial. On the one hand, Mario's family maintained that this whole situation was blown out of proportion. Mario's stepfather, Richard O'Connor, said to the Birmingham Post-Herald, "They went on this vacation and didn't tell either parents, and the next thing I know, the police are around here looking for Mario." Richard referenced how Mario took Cheryl and Dominic to Texas beaches, and how Mario's original shoplifting charge was for stealing his son a birthday present, which is strange if he had $5,000 in the bank. But anyway, the authorities obviously thought this whole story was bullshit. The police chief of Gulfport said to the Sun-Herald, "This is a classic case of an abused woman where it appears the system failed her." Additionally, I'm not sure how Mario's family is rationalizing Cheryl's broken door, cut phone wires, and bruised face. But it doesn't matter what I think. The jury thought Mario was guilty. And that was that. Or that should have been that. Because unfortunately, this was only the beginning. In 1998, 32-year-old Mario Centobie was incarcerated in the Mississippi State Penitentiary. It's located in Parchman, Mississippi, and is often referred to as Parchman Prison. That's where Mario met 19-year-old Jeremy Granberry. Jeremy was serving 6 years. He would have only served 5 years. But in November of 1997, Jeremy and another inmate, 21-year-old Christopher Wally, attempted to escape from Parchman Prison. The pair had just walked away while on work detail at a nearby pig and chicken farm. They were caught by that afternoon, and Jeremy was sentenced to an additional year in prison. On Thursday, June 25, 1998, Mario and Jeremy were to be transported from Parchman Prison to Laurel, Mississippi for court proceedings. These hearings were directly related to Jeremy's case, so it made sense that he was going. But Mario was not supposed to be going to these court hearings. He had asked Jeremy to put his name on the witness list, because this was the first step of Mario's plan. So Mario and Jeremy climbed into a vehicle with Sheriff Maurice Hooks of Jones County and Ray Butler. Ray was a former lawman and a friend of Sheriff Hooks. Later on, Hooks would explain that he had brought his buddy Ray along because he thought he was only transporting one inmate, Jeremy. Mario coming was news to Sheriff Hooks. That's also the reason why Hooks arrived in an unsecured vehicle. It was supposed to have a divider between the front seat where the officers sit and the back seat where the inmates sit. But this vehicle did not have that, and as you'll soon learn, this lack of divider was going to make all the difference. And it's important to note here that Mario and Jeremy's ankles were shackled, but their wrists were not. It's unclear why. The trip from Parchman to Laurel would take nearly 4 hours. So a little over 2 hours in, the group of 4 made a pit stop in Richland, Mississippi. Sheriff Hooks let Mario and Jeremy use the restroom, and he and Ray got some coffee. As Hooks went to get back into the vehicle, all hell broke loose. Sheriff Hooks later testified, "I opened the front door, got into the driver's seat, put my coffee into the holder, and closed the door. Granberry reached over the seat, grabbed me by the neck, and pulled me into the seat backwards. Centobie went for my gun and hit me with it on the head 4 or 5 times." Armed with Sheriff Hooks' .45 caliber automatic pistol, Mario forced Hooks and Ray to an old barn in an isolated area. He and Jeremy tied up the sheriff and his friend to a post. Then they left them there. Mario and Jeremy fled in Sheriff Hooks' vehicle. Sheriff Hooks and Ray Butler stayed tied up in that barn for approximately 20 hours. They were found on Friday, June 26th, by a couple visiting a nearby cemetery. The 2 men received treatment for cuts, swollen limbs, and dehydration. They both made a full recovery. After Mario and Jeremy stole the sheriff's car, they stopped at a Walmart 25 miles to the north in Livingston, Mississippi. They walked inside while still wearing their prison uniforms. The uniforms consisted of white shirts with MSDOC for Mississippi Department of Corrections printed on the back and dark pants. In Walmart, the 2 men purchased black t-shirts, a compass, water purification tablets, and other items. Mario and Jeremy also found fake plastic sheriff's badges in Hooks' car. Hooks would give these out to children. Mario and Jeremy pinned them to their shirts, probably in the hopes that they might fool someone into thinking they were supposed to be in this marked law enforcement vehicle. With new clothes, fake badges, and some provisions, the 2 escapees were prepared to go on the run, just like they had planned all along. 7 hours later, Mario and Jeremy were near Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And it just so happened that 47-year-old Captain Cecil Lancaster of the Tuscaloosa Police Department was coming home late. He had been held up by a meeting at work. Lancaster saw Hooks' marked patrol car drive by on I-359, and although Lancaster had no idea that 2 fugitives were on the loose, he noticed that something was off about the car. First off, he saw that the sheriff's car was missing its rear bumper. As luck would have it, this was not actually related to Mario or Jeremy's fugitive status. The bumper had been dislodged during a previous accident Sheriff Hooks had been involved in. Still, it gave Captain Lancaster pause. Then he also noticed that the car had no tags. Plus, the 2 people inside the car didn't acknowledge him as they passed by. As a precaution, Lancaster pulled the sheriff's car over. As Captain Lancaster walked toward the driver's side of the car, he got a good look at Jeremy Granberry. Jeremy was in the driver's seat, so he was easy to see, but Lancaster was unable to see Mario in the front passenger seat. Before Lancaster made it all the way to the driver's side, Mario leaned back behind the front seat. Although Lancaster didn't have a clear vision of Mario, he could see that someone was pointing a gun at him. According to later testimony, the first time Mario tried to shoot Lancaster, the gun only clicked. There was no shell in the gun's chamber. So Mario cocked the gun and fired again. He shot through the back window on the driver's side and hit Lancaster twice. The first shot struck Lancaster's gun clip on his police belt, and the second hit him in the torso. Lancaster suffered 2 broken ribs, and the bullet's exit wound was near his tailbone. He was a very lucky man. After being hit, Lancaster fell to the ground. That's when he saw the sheriff's vehicle begin to move forward. He realized they were going to try and run him over. He testified, "I saw the reverse light come on, and that shocked me back to reality. I pulled out my gun and fired a shot into the rear window in the high left side. A second shot shattered the back window." Jeremy and Mario decided it wasn't worth it to run over Lancaster and fled the scene. As they sped off, Lancaster kept firing, but they were gone. Soon after, a fellow police officer saw that Captain Lancaster was hurt on the interstate. That officer, Sergeant Jeffrey Elmore, used his shirt and a piece of cardboard to slow Lancaster's bleeding. Other concerned bystanders had also stopped to help. Eventually, Captain Lancaster would make it to a hospital. He was reported as being in fair condition the day after the shooting, but he did have to undergo surgery due to his injuries. Following their run-in with Lancaster, Mario and Jeremy abandoned Sheriff Hooks' patrol car in the backyard of a mobile home in South Tuscaloosa. After nearly killing Captain Lancaster, they probably realized the marked car was drawing unnecessary attention. That's when they stole the 1981 Mercury Grand Marquis I mentioned in the opening. By this point, the local authorities were aware that Mario and Jeremy were on the run. The two fugitives were considered armed and dangerous, and law enforcement officers were going door to door to check on locals and advise them to stay inside. On Saturday, June 27th, Jeremy and Mario stopped for food near Leeds, Alabama. Jeremy stopped at a McDonald's while Mario went to a Taco Bell. Security footage was later recovered showing Mario making his Taco Bell order. Later that day, Officer Keith Turner pulled over Jeremy and Mario for a routine traffic stop. After Mario murdered Officer Keith Turner in cold blood, Jeremy turned their stolen car into a driveway. And per later testimony, Jeremy looked at Mario and said, "Well, this is it." And Mario responded, "You can give up if you want to, man. I ain't going back to Parchman." Then Mario got out of the car. Shortly after, Jeremy did too. He fled across a baseball field and hid in a swampy wooded area. And immediately after, Mario did the same in a slightly different direction. When Officer Chris Long arrived on the scene, he fired at Mario. Mario fell to the ground as if he had been shot, so Chris thought he had made contact. This was further reinforced when Mario began crawling towards the woods. Later, investigators would realize that Mario had not been shot. There was no blood on the ground where he had fallen. Mario was either trying to mislead Officer Long or he was avoiding more gunfire. But thinking that Mario was somewhat incapacitated, Chris turned his attention toward Keith. He felt around Keith's chest, searching for a wound. It was 10:30 p.m. and dark. Chris couldn't see that Keith had been shot in the head. But then Chris shined his light on Keith and saw the blood. His neck and collar were covered in it. Officer Keith Turner was killed in the line of duty on his 2-year wedding anniversary. His funeral was held 3 days later at 1 p.m. on Tuesday, June 30th at the Raglan Methodist Church. He was laid to rest in the Garden of Memory Cemetery in Raglan, Alabama. His father was also buried there, and his mother was laid to rest there too at the age of 94 in 2021. At the time of Keith's death, his mother had seen him a few days earlier. She told the Birmingham Post-Herald, "The last thing he said to me was, 'I love you.' There couldn't have been a better way to say goodbye." A year after his death, in May of 1999, Keith was posthumously awarded the Medal of Valor, and a stone memorial was dedicated to his memory. The Moody Police Chief Robert Clements said of Keith, "He had tremendous potential. He was a fine, fine man. It was just our bad luck that those predators happened to come through our town." Following Officer Keith Turner's murder, a huge manhunt for Mario and Jeremy began. Detectives primarily focused on a 10-square-mile area in St. Clair County. The Cross Baptist Church became the headquarters for all search activities. Roadblocks were put up. Helicopters circled the air. Hundreds of federal, state, and local officers were put on the case, and numerous law enforcement agencies helped. Some of them were the FBI, the Alabama Bureau of Investigation, the Alabama State Troopers, multiple county sheriff's departments, and multiple city police departments, including the Moody Police Department where Officer Keith Turner was employed. Jeremy was captured at 2 p.m. on Sunday, June 28th. It was less than 1 day since he had ran. Bloodhounds had found him hiding in a sewage ditch not far from where he had initially fled the scene. He was charged with capital murder for Officer Keith Turner and attempted murder for Captain Cecil Lancaster. As the police apprehended him, Locals watched. They clapped and cheered. The authorities high-fived and honked their horns. Many onlookers heard Jeremy screaming that he was not responsible for killing Officer Keith Turner. He was held at the St. Clair County Jail. Even though Jeremy was quickly recovered, Mario escaped the authorities for several days. He survived by stealing vegetables from people's gardens and breaking into homes for food. He would take items from the back of people's refrigerators in the hopes that they might not notice he had been there. Law enforcement officers were optimistic that the hot weather might exhaust Mario. It was about 90 degrees most days. Alabama State Trooper William Rogers told the Birmingham Post-Herald, "We think the heat will work in our favor. That's why we want to keep continuous pressure on him. On a hot day, it's hard to keep moving." But the heat didn't seem to faze Mario, because on Monday, June 29th, law enforcement had no clue where he was. Jeremy did not provide them with any helpful information, and the leads coming in from locals were largely incorrect. Still, the police were pretty sure Mario remained in this area. As a precaution, residents were encouraged to lock their doors and stay inside. A special agent for the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms told the Birmingham Post-Herald, "He is very cunning. He's desperate to do anything to not be incarcerated. He's on the extreme violent end of the criminal subculture." And a different officer told the Birmingham Post-Herald, "Now's not a good time to take a walk in the woods or go pick berries." June turned into July, and Mario Centobie was still nowhere to be found. A local fireworks company called Crazy Bill Fireworks shut down business to help with the investigation. They urged everyone in the area to not shoot off any fireworks. They didn't want the sound or sights to interfere with the investigation. On July 4th, Mario escaped the authorities' search perimeter undetected due to rain and dense fog. He went to a Moody, Alabama gas station. There, he carjacked a man named Daniel Alexander at about 9:30 p.m. Daniel wasn't even from Alabama. He was from Arkansas, visiting relatives, but he had the misfortune of being in Mario's path. Mario forced Daniel to drive him to Mobile. Detectives later revealed that they believed Mario was on his way to Cheryl and Dominic's home in Gulfport. Fortunately, the authorities had seen that coming. They had already put Cheryl and Dominic in protective custody. As they crossed the state lines from Alabama to Mississippi, Mario and Daniel stopped at the Mississippi Welcome Center. Mario must have been driving at this point because Daniel was pretending to be asleep. When Mario went inside the Welcome Center, Daniel quickly drove the car away. He called the police immediately and told them Mario's location. Seeing that Daniel had escaped, Mario knew right away that his location was compromised. So he hitched a ride with a van full of tourists to put distance between himself and the Mississippi Welcome Center. The van occupants later confirmed to the authorities that Mario was indeed headed to see his wife and child. 15-year-old veteran Lieutenant Obie Wells was at the Ocean Springs Sheriff's Department building when he received a call. The caller informed Wells that escaped fugitive Mario Centobie might be traveling in a van on I-10. So Wells set out to find the van and Mario. Through sheer luck, he spotted them right away. He started tailing the van and radioed for backup. Once Wells felt comfortable that he had support, he pulled the van over near Pascagoula, Mississippi. Mario got out of the van right away. He wouldn't listen to the lieutenant's or the other officers' commands, and he was still armed with Sheriff Hooks' gun. But when Mario realized he was outnumbered by officers with no place to go, he finally surrendered. He emptied his clip from his gun, held out his arms, and positioned himself spread eagle in the van. Throughout his capture, Mario did not say a word, and at about 7:20 a.m. on July 5, 1998, 32-year-old Mario Centobie was arrested after 11 days of being on the run. He was charged with capital murder for Officer Keith Turner's death and attempted murder for Officer Cecil Lancaster. The Moody Police Department where Officer Keith Turner had worked, was disappointed that they were not the ones to catch Mario. Their police chief, Robert Clements, told the Birmingham Post-Herald, "That will be a regret for every member of the Moody Police Department forever. He destroyed one of us, and we wanted to get him." Although Mario's case was not high profile back when he was first tried in 1996, it certainly was now, and for good reason. This manhunt involved at least 1,000 hours of overtime for authorities. In total, about 600 law enforcement officers were involved, and more than 130 agencies had played a part in Mario's search and capture. By the end of it all, catching Mario had cost taxpayers a modest estimate of $1 million. It would be almost $2 million today. Plus, coverage of the case was especially popular when 3 different people filed 3 separate lawsuits against Sheriff Maurice Hooks and other Jones County officials. Keith's widow, Brandy Turner, the officer who was almost killed, Captain Cecil Lancaster, and the carjacked man, Daniel Alexander, all wanted $10 million each. $30 million from a county with less than 70,000 in population. Brandy, Lancaster, and Daniel felt that it was an oversight by Jones County that Mario and Jeremy had escaped in the first place. One lawsuit specifically cited that missing divider that should have barricaded Mario and Jeremy from Sheriff Hooks. Eventually, all 3 settled their lawsuits for undisclosed amounts of money. Following his arrest, officers questioned Mario for 4 hours in a Pascagoula jail. He confessed. By July 8th, Mario was transferred to the Etowah County Jail. They couldn't hold him in the St. Clair County Jail because they were worried for his safety. Mario had killed a police officer in cold blood in a small town. There was worry about vigilantes. At the time that Mario arrived at the Etowah County Jail, Officer Keith Turner's widow, Brandy, was also at the same jail. She was trying to get more information about her husband's murder. She had no idea Mario was going to be there, but once she saw her husband's killer, she asked to speak with him. According to court documents, Brandy was escorted to Mario's cell. Then Mario asked the present officers to leave. They did, leaving Brandy and Mario alone for a private conversation. For days, Brandy did not tell authorities what Mario said to her during this time, but eventually she revealed the following. Brandy asked Mario, "Why did you murder my husband?" And Mario had responded that he did not murder Keith, he merely shot him. He told Brandy that he had to. You might have thought I was about to wrap up, that we were almost at the finish line. That's probably what every person following Mario's case had thought too. But Mario wasn't done yet, and in October 1998, 3 months after being taken into custody, Mario successfully escaped jail again. This time, Mario escaped by charming 44-year-old Donna Hawkins. Donna was a prison guard at the Etowah County Jail, and while Donna and Mario would not have been able to interact in person, they did communicate via written letters. Other jail workers suggested they also could have spoken via the prison's speaker system. Donna had left Mario's maximum security cell and cell block unlocked. So on Thursday, October 8th, between 8 and 10 p.m., Mario walked out the front door of the jail. He had fashioned a silhouette of a person in his prison bed using sheets, pillows, and hair clippings. So no one realized Mario was gone until breakfast the next morning. By that time, Mario had disappeared. He had arranged for a former inmate who was out on bond to help him find a ride out. That inmate, 28-year-old Brent Andre Paris, was later charged with hindering prosecution. As Mario fled once more, the authorities posted wanted flyers all over the southeastern United States. They focused primarily on service stations and rest areas along major highways. On Tuesday, October 13th, 5 days after Mario escaped, Alabama Governor Fob James offered a $10,000 reward, almost $16,000 today, for any information leading to his capture or conviction. After the reward was put out, the number of calls about Mario's sightings increased. They had to install more phones at the command center just to take them all in. By October 14th, the authorities had issued an unlawful flight warrant for Mario. Investigators suspected Mario would continue to try to make his way back to his ex-wife Cheryl and his son Dominic. But honestly, they had no idea where he was. Not until Mario contacted a woman named Francie Owens. Francie was a longtime friend of Donna Hawkins, the jailer who had let Mario escape. Mario wanted Francie to deliver Donna some letters he had written to her. But instead of delivering the letters to Donna, Francie delivered them to the police. As a direct result, Mario was caught at 8:45 a.m. on October 21st, 1998. It had been 13 days since he had escaped. He was apprehended at a Citgo convenience store in northern Atlanta, Georgia. He was sitting in the passenger seat of a red Ford pickup. The driver of the pickup was a 24-year-old truck driver. That truck driver was out of the vehicle and on the phone when the officers surrounded Mario. Apparently, the truck driver had been letting Mario stay at his apartment, but he did not know who Mario was, so he didn't face charges. Once again, Mario surrendered peacefully. He had to. There were 7 law enforcement officers with guns pointed at him. Mario was carrying a stolen .357 caliber revolver in his backpack. But he couldn't get to it in time. According to present officers, Mario appeared incredibly surprised when they found him. He later confirmed that he had no idea they were onto him. Jailer Donna Hawkins had been arrested on Friday, October 9th, the day after Mario escaped. She was released on bond a few months later. By the end of it all, Donna was sentenced to 18 months in prison for helping Mario. According to her defense attorney, Donna, who was married, had not engaged in a romantic relationship with Mario. Nope, she had supposedly just made an honest mistake. At the very most, Mario had tricked her. But this theory falls a little flat when you consider it was Mario's continued correspondence with Donna that led to his second capture. This whole ordeal brought a huge amount of criticism to the Etowah County Jail's security measures. A sheriff told local papers that there was nothing wrong with the jail's security, but he suggested that they might start implementing psychological screenings before hiring guards. You think? Following Mario's second capture, he was held at the Federal Correctional Institution in Talladega after a stop in Gadsden. This was a maximum security prison. They later transferred him to St. Clair Correctional Facility. Due to rampant publicity, Mario and Jeremy's trials were both moved from St. Clair County to Elmore County. And although the 2 men were to be tried separately, their trials happened to be in the same building at the same time. This was because Mario and Jeremy were extreme flight risks. The court was trying to mitigate their security costs. After all, Mario had 2 escapes under his belt, and by this time, Jeremy had 3. In April of 1999, while awaiting this trial, Jeremy had broken a window of the St. Clair County Jail. He was trying to escape again. The authorities suspected he was going to use bed sheets to climb to the ground. On Monday, May 10, 1999, both Mario and Jeremy's trials for the capital murder of Officer Keith Turner began. Both men faced the death penalty. Barely a week later, both men were convicted. There really was no question about their guilt. Jeremy's only defense was that he was not the mastermind of this operation, just a follower. And both Sheriff Hooks and Mario's account of the situation corroborated that. And likely for that reason, the jury voted 7-5 that 20-year-old Jeremy Granberry should be sentenced to life without parole, not death. Today, Jeremy is about 45 years old and incarcerated in the St. Clair Correctional Facility. He will never receive parole, and he has never appealed. Mario, on the other hand, was facing the death penalty. He was obviously the shooter in Keith's murder, and against the advice of his lawyers, Mario testified in his own defense. On the stand, Mario admitted to killing Officer Keith Turner. He said that he wanted to tell the jury he wasn't a terrorist mad dog killer. He explained, "If I had that in me, then the body count would be big." So on Friday, May 14, 1999, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before convicting 33-year-old Mario Centobie of capital murder. That Sunday, he was sentenced to death. Less than a month later, on Thursday, June 3, 1999, officials searched Mario, and they found he had a makeshift plastic handcuff key hidden in his mouth. He was planning to escape yet again. He wouldn't spit out the key until the authorities shocked him with an electric belt he was wearing. Jeremy and Mario still face charges in the attempted murder of Captain Cecil Lancaster. In the year 2000, 21-year-old Jeremy Granberry pled guilty. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms in addition to his previous sentence. Mario went through the motions of a jury trial, but the result was the same. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms. The prosecutors were not willing to drop this case against Mario because they feared his death sentence might be overturned in the appeals process. And Mario did appeal once in August of 2001, but by November, it had been denied in a 5-0 decision. He soon dropped all efforts for remaining appeals. On April 28, 2005, 39-year-old Mario Centobie ate his final meals. For lunch, he had chili and rice, okra and corn tomato soup, cornbread, gingerbread cake, and fruit punch. For a snack, he ate pizza, a poor boy, and a Philly cheesesteak sandwich, and 3 sodas. And for dinner, he ate barbecue chicken, egg noodles with butter, turnip greens, candied sweet potatoes, and a strawberry soda. At 4:10 p.m., he was served communion by a Catholic priest from Birmingham. He said in an affidavit he preferred death over life in prison and that he was ready to die. He also denounced a Montgomery attorney who filed an unsolicited appeal on his behalf, claiming that he was mentally ill. "The only kind of mental condition I may be suffering from is depression, which is just a condition of being on death row. The crimes I have committed have also caused me to have some depression." At 6 p.m. that day, he was executed by lethal injection. Multiple Moody police officers were present to witness his death. Mario Giovanni Centobie, killer and escape artist, smiled slightly and gave a thumbs up before he was executed that night for the 1998 murder of Moody police officer Keith Turner. He said nothing. He didn't acknowledge his mother or brother sitting in a witness room to his right, or the relatives and co-workers of Turner in a separate witness room straight ahead. Though he had been divorced for 10 years, Centobie still wore his wedding ring. He was pronounced dead at 6:22 p.m. Any of those hoping for an apology did not get one. "I never saw any remorse," Patrick Turner said. He did not even apologize to his own mama for what he put her through. He didn't care. It was an ignominious, shameful ending for a man who had once been hailed a hero for his work in the Amtrak train disaster. Southern Fried True Crime is hosted and produced by me, Erica Kelley. Today's episode was researched and written by Andrea Marshbank. As usual, any editorial comments and opinions are my own. Southern Fried's original music is by Rob Harrison of Gamma Radio, and the original graphic art is by Coley Horner. Today's episode was edited and mixed by Brandon Schexnayder of Southern Gothic and Erica Kelley. If you have any case suggestions, please go to my website, southernfriedtruecrime.com, and click on the Listener Suggestion tab, or email sftcresearch@gmail.com. This is the best way for me to get those little-known cases y'all always send me. Please remember that I do not accept suggestions on social media private messages, but please come join our Facebook group, Southern Fried True Crime Fans Discussion Group, where we swap recipes, worship Dolly Parton, and share memes. We do, of course, discuss true crime, not just Southern fried, but all kinds. But it is still very much a Southern lifestyle group. Our group is a safe and fun corner of Facebook, and by God, we mean it when we say no shit asses allowed. It's not just a motto, it's how we run the group. If you enjoyed today's show, don't forget to subscribe and please tell a friend or rate and review. I'm also on all large platforms like iTunes, iHeart, Spotify, Amazon, and Audible. Until next time, thanks so much for listening. Y'all take care.